President.
Senator from Kentucky.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, our country has endured a 9% unemployment rate for a longer period of time than at any time since the Great Depression. Yet, unfortunately, the Democratic leader is reluctant to address this problem of joblessness in a serious way. One way to address it would have been to take the three trade agreements which were negotiated 4 and 5 years ago, one with Colombia, one with South Korea, one with Panama, and send them up to the Senate and House and let us ratify them and let us move ahead to avoid losing 350,000 jobs, that's an estimate of the United States Chamber of Commerce, or create as many as 250,000 jobs, that's the estimate of the White House. Yet those three trade agreements had been sitting on the president's desk since the day he took office nearly 3 years ago. They arrived yesterday, or Monday, I suppose it was, and they're here, waiting for us to act on them. Every day we don't act on them delays the day when we avoid losing 350,000 jobs or create 250,000 jobs. That's been the case every day for the last nearly 1,000 days. That would be a good way to address the jobs issue. But we haven't. Instead, we have had the president going around the country during the summer blaming Republicans for not acting on the three trade agreements when, in fact, the president hadn't sent them to us. There's no way that the Congress can act on them until the president forwards them, which he now has. And if he has, why are we not debating them today? That would be a good way to deal with the jobs issue. Then here's another example. On September 8th, the president asked to come before the Congress and proposed his jobs bill. He said, if I counted correctly, and I was sitting respectfully on the second row, almost on the front row, I think he said as many as 17 times, pass this jobs bill now. And if that weren't enough, he said it almost every day since then. The Republican leader mentioned a few times. He was in Dallas yesterday. Pass this jobs bill now. I'm ready to enact it, said the President of the United States. Well, it's been sitting there on the Democratic leader's desk for the last couple of weeks, ever since the president sent it up here. He spoke about it on September the 8th. The person in this body whose job it is to set the agenda is the Democratic leader, the member of the president's own party. Why doesn't he bring it up? So the Republican leader yesterday said, I'll show courtesy to the president. I will ask the Senate to do what the president has asked that we do, which is pass this jobs bill now, and the Democratic leader objected. So here for the second time, we have the president running around the country saying one thing, and then we try to do it, and his leader in the Senate objects. What were we doing instead? Well, a couple of weeks ago, the Democrats manufactured a crisis over disaster aid, when we could have been debating the trade bill, the jobs bill, and we could have been offering the Republican proposals, which we have, to encourage trade, to give this president and future presidents new trade authority, to reform the tax law, and to have a timeout on regulations that are throwing a big wet blanket, making it more expensive and harder to create new jobs in America. That would have been the kind of debate that we could have had on the Republican proposals that we believe would make a difference in this urgent job situation, which has given us 9% unemployment for a longer period of time than at any time since the Great Depression. So now this week, what are we doing? Well, we are debating a piece of legislation. The Democratic leader has decided this is the important piece of legislation to deal with jobs this week. And what will it do? It will give a punch in the nose to China, our second largest trading partner, our third largest export market, and our fastest growing export market, and the second largest economy in the world. Now, history teaches us what will happen. We saw that during the Great Depression. Perhaps it was the cause of the Great Depression. We remember the Smoot-Hawley tariff, the trade war that developed, the reciprocal punches in the nose that countries gave to themselves over trade, plunging the world into a depression. So here we are in a fragile moment when headlines are saying we may be about to dip into a second recession, and what do? The Democratic majority says their best idea about creating jobs is to punch in the nose our second largest trade partner, our third largest export market, and our fastest growing export market, even though we know exactly what they'll do to us. History teaches us they'll punch us right back in the nose, and the result will be a trade war which destroys jobs rather than creates jobs. Such legislation as that now pending on this floor is not how the world's strongest economy, the United States of America, should conduct itself. Such legislation is a sign of weakness or lack of self-confidence or defeatism that is not worthy of the United States of America. In Tennessee, we see the advantages of trading with the world, including with China. China is our third largest export market after Canada and Mexico. Our leading exports are chemicals and agricultural products. Tennessee exports to China totaled $1.85 billion, a 43% increase over 2009. A little over 7% of all of our exports went to China. In Tennessee, 116,000 jobs are related to the export of manufactured goods, 5.3 million jobs in America. At a time of joblessness, why should we be punching in the nose someone to whom we might sell goods, and that would create jobs in the United States? What should we do instead? Of course, there's legitimate concern about the way China values its currency. The administration should work with China to change that. China should accelerate the appreciation of its currency. But what else should the United States of America do? We might take a lesson from history. I remember 30 years ago, when I was just beginning my time as governor of Tennessee, China was not the country in the news, it was Japan. There were books written, Japan #1. The United States was, as it is today, the world's largest economy, but everybody was predicting, watch out for Japan. Japan is becoming #1. The United States cannot keep up with Japan, it was said. Their autos, their computers, their electronic goods, their other sophisticated goods were going to overwhelm our markets, and we would quickly fall behind. There was, in the early 1980s, a $46 billion trade deficit with Japan. What do? Well, we didn't act defeatist. We didn't play games. We didn't act like we were the 15th largest economy in the world instead of the first. We asserted ourselves. We went to Japan and said to them, make in the United States what you sell in the United States, and take down your trade barriers so we can sell in your country what we make in ours. I went there myself. I remember vividly going to Tokyo in 1979 in November. I met with the Nissan officials. They were considering locating a manufacturing plant in the United States. At that time, they were making all the Nissan cars and all the Nissan trucks in Japan that they sold in the United States. But they wanted to be in this market, which was and is the most profitable automobile market in the world. So we said to them, make here what you sell here. And they did. They came to the United States, and where are we 30 years later? Nissan is saying to us that they have operated for 25 years now, the most efficient automobile and truck plant in North America, and they're going to be making 85% of what they sell in the United States here in the United States. Nothing has done more to create higher incomes and better jobs in Tennessee than the arrival of Nissan and Japanese industry, followed by the American auto industry into our state over the last 30 years. That's how a strong and confident country asserts itself in world competition. That's not just true with automobiles. It's true with many other manufacturing companies that have come to our state from Japan and from other places, and that is exactly the way we ought to deal with China. Our administration can insert itself in a variety of ways about the currency issue, but we should not act like we're afraid of China any more than we were afraid of Japan 30 years ago. We should seize this as a moment of opportunity. We should not escalate a trade war that no one will win. We should grow trade and sales and investment in China and urge them to make in the United States what they sell in the United States. If they should do that, that will create jobs here rather than destroy jobs, as history teaches us a trade war will do. So I hope, Madam President, that the Senate will decisively reject the legislation that's being proposed to initiate a trade war with China. Now, if I may speak on another subject, in February of last year, we had a fairly extraordinary event at the Blair House here in Washington. The President invited a large number of members of Congress, must have been 60 or 70 of us, around a table. He sat there the whole day, and we sat around the table and we talked about health care. It was called the Health Care Summit. A great many Americans have watched that live on television, and because of the internet and other explosions of new media, they still watch some of the things that were said that day. The reason I know that is because people come up to me often and talk about an exchange that I had with the President of the United States. The issue was about individual health care premiums. Citing a Congressional Budget Office report, I said to the President, Mr. President, respectfully, your new health care law that you propose is going to increase individual premiums. He stopped me and said, now, Lamar, let's get our facts right. You're wrong about that, and proceeded to explain to me why I was wrong and he was right. With all respect, I believe I was right, and even just a little year later, what the Congressional Budget Office was saying then, which was that individual premiums would go up as a result of the health care law, the last 13 months have shown that we were exactly right. Just this last week, the Kaiser Foundation released a survey that showed that the average family premium for employer-sponsored insurance was $15,000 in 2011, a 9% increase over the previous year. Now, let me quickly say that the average family premium for employer-sponsored insurance is not the same as the individual insurance that we were talking about, I was talking about with the President a year ago, but it is the same subject. Republicans were saying that we opposed the health care bill because it would increase premiums. And what we wanted to do was to lower the cost of health care for Americans by going step by step in that direction, rather than expanding an expensive health care system that was already too expensive for most Americans, and doing it in a way that would increase premiums for many Americans. Well, ABC News said the Kaiser Family Foundation report, quote, underlines that many of the promises surrounding President Obama's health care legislation remain unfulfilled, though the White House argues that change is coming. Even the New York Times on September 27 said the steep increase in rates is particularly unwelcome at a time when the economy is still sputtering. Many businesses cite the high cost of coverage as a factor in their decision not to hire. And health insurance has become increasingly unaffordable for many Americans. I've reported on the Senate floor my conversations with the chief executive officers of restaurant chains around the country. Together, they are the second largest employer in the country after the government, and they employ a great many young people and low-income people, the kind of men and women who are looking for jobs today. And what they were telling me was that the mandates of the health care law will make it more difficult for them to hire people. In one specific example, one of the largest of the healthcare of the restaurant chains was saying that he operates his store with 90 employees today, and because of the healthcare mandates, he will seek to operate his store with 70 employees a day. That's not a way to increase the number of jobs. But there are other provisions in the healthcare law that cause premiums to go up, which was the point of the Kaiser Family Foundation report and the point of my discussion with the President in February of 2010. The CMS chief actuary had predicted this in 2010, saying that by 2014, still a couple of years away, 3 years away, growth in private health insurance premiums is expected to accelerate to 9.4%, 4.4% higher than in the absence of health reform. The President had said in his discussion with me that under the law that he proposed, the individual market would cost 40 to 20% less. That was also in the Congressional Budget Office letter. But those reductions were overwhelmed by other costs that were identified in the CBO letter that would produce a 27 to 30% increase. So the net result, according to the predictions of February 2010 by the Congressional Budget Office, was that there would be an increase in individual premiums of 10 to 13%. Now, these individual premiums that individuals buy, are not the largest share of insurance policies in America, but they affect probably 12 to 15 million Americans. So that's a lot of people who are having their insurance costs go up. Aon Hewitt's recently released 2011 Health Insurance Trend Driver Survey reports that for 2011, individual health care plans reported estimated 4.7% increases due to the new health care law. And then according to the September 8, 2010 Wall Street Journal article, quote, health insurers say they plan to raise premiums for some Americans as a direct result of the health overhaul in coming weeks, complicating Democrats' efforts to trumpet their signature achievement before the midterm elections. Aetna, some Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, other smaller carriers have asked for premium increases of between 1% and 9% to pay for extra benefits required under the law. And in the same article, it says that Aetna said that extra benefits forced it to seek rate increases for individual plans of 5 to 7% in California and 5.5 to 6 to 8% in Nevada. This was precisely the discussion that I was having with the president in February 2010 when I said that under the health care law, because of the mandates in the law, individual health care premiums cost will go up. In Wisconsin and North Carolina, according to that same article, Celtic Insurance Company says half of the 18% increase it's seeking comes from complying with health care mandates. And then in a September 16 article last year in the Hartford Courant, Connecticut is seeking an average 22% hike for its individual market HMO plans. Anthem, Blue Cross, and Blue Shield in Connecticut say in a letter it expects the federal health reform law to increase rates by as much as 22.9% for just a single provision. Now, this happens for predictable reasons because of the requirements in the law for minimum credible coverage. In other words, you have to buy a more expensive, if you're required to buy a better kind of health insurance, if you're required to buy a Cadillac instead of a Chevrolet, it's going to cost more, and it does cost more. Another factor that will cause the insurance premiums to rise is the new taxes on insurance, life-saving medical devices, and medicines in the health reform law. Someone has to pay for those costs, and the ones who are going to pay for them are the people who buy health insurance. And then there's the question of what we call cost shift. When we add 25 million Americans to Medicaid, premiums will increase because the costs will shift to private insurers to help pay for those costs, and that's according to the chief actuary of CMS, which is in this administration. And then finally, age rating is going to cause insurance premiums to go up. What it basically says is that older Americans won't have to pay as much, so younger Americans are going to have to pay more. So, Madam President, it's no surprise that under the new health care law, health insurance premiums are going up, becoming an even bigger drag on employment and on family budgets. This was predicted by the Congressional Budget Office while we were debating the health care law. It was predicted by Republicans who offered an alternative to take steps to decrease costs in health care instead of this big comprehensive law that expands a system that already costs too much. And it offers even more reasons why we should repeal or make significant changes in the health care law if we want to create an environment in which we can make it easier and cheaper to grow private sector jobs and in which more Americans can afford reasonably cost health insurance. I thank the President and I yield the floor.